presents will seem to be pretty much out there. And I wouldn't blame anyone for being skeptical. My own background is in research methods and statistics, which I taught at the University of Toronto for 13 years. Now, skepticism is something I basically made a living by. If something doesn't add up, it doesn't even make it to the Navy file, as far as I'm concerned. But I decided, after first becoming acquainted with what Stephen was doing, to look into things personally. And after a remarkably short amount of time, I was able to personally verify firsthand for myself some of the claims and things that Stephen Greer said. And at first those claims seemed utterly incredible. But believe me, when you personally verify something and you get lots of independent confirmation from sources, very different sources, it starts to lend a lot of credibility to everything else he has to say. Now, if Stephen Greer says to you that he had a meeting with a certain public official and that certain things were discussed, or that certain events took place that aren't commonly known or discussed, you can be sure that it happened. Now, that doesn't mean you have to agree 100% with every conclusion he comes to. Certainly, I don't see eye to eye on every last bit of detail of his perspective, but that is neither here nor there. We need to be asking the questions and looking at the evidence that he and the Disclosure Project witnesses have brought to the table at great personal cost and risk. That evidence and those questions need to be part of everyday public discourse and political debate. The future of humanity demands on that debate at least taking place and then action being taken upon it. I suggest we take this opportunity to listen very closely to what he has to say. Please welcome Stephen Greer.
And thank you, Mr. Hellyer and Victor. It's an honor to be here, to be back in Toronto, and to address you and members of the media. This is the 5th year anniversary of the National Press Club, where the first of these top-secret witnesses stepped forward with the whole world watching. They were allowed to watch briefly before the intelligence people pulled it off the airwaves. I will give you an idea of how well wrapped this whole thing is. The National Press Club, 5 years ago today, with 22 of these military and intelligence witnesses in front of the world's cameras, and it being live webcasts on the internet. It was the most watched internet broadcast at that time in the history of the internet. The broadcasting entity is the entity that hosts CNN and the Department of Defense at the National Press Club. They said there were so many people trying to see it, it crashed their bandwidth. They used up all their bandwidth. But then, the first hour of it was externally electronically jammed, probably from the National Security Agency of the United States. It took 1 hour after the beginning of it for it then to get loaded on so that you, the people, could see it. They don't want you to know the truth. And I'm going to share with you the truth that we know. I began this effort in 1990, actually. We have now nearly 500 of these military and intelligence and corporate witnesses. Some of these witnesses are from corporations such as Lockheed, Northrop, SAIC, Science Applications International Corporation, E-Systems, Raytheon, and others. These corporations are sitting on the definitive solution to a good many of the world's most pressing problems, up to and including the need to replace the fossil fuel, meaning oil, gas, coal, nuclear power systems, with sustainable energy and propulsion systems, which a kleptocracy have robbed from you and from us for the last 50 years. It's time that we say no to that, and it's time for the disclosure of the truth. On December 13, 1993, I was in the unenviable, dreadful position of having been asked by the Director of Central Intelligence of the United States, who had just been appointed by President Clinton to brief him and the Clinton administration on this problem. My uncle was the senior project engineer who designed the lunar module that landed on the moon. And I'm just a country doctor from North Carolina, actually. But I had an interest in this since childhood, and I began to study this very intensely beginning again in 1990. By 1993, we had identified several dozen of these military witnesses. We had identified nearly 4,000 cases where these objects had landed on terra firma and left physical evidence. We had identified over 3,000 military and civilian professional airline pilots who had encountered them with radar confirmation in many of those cases. We had several thousand pages of official, not hoax, officially released government documents that we had acquired from the United States, Canada, one of the most important documents is from Canada from 1951, and from the KGB files, which were translated for us. The memo I got from the point of contact to the Director of Central Intelligence said, Dr. Greer, the President and the CIA Director have made directed inquiries into this matter and have been denied access. This I thought to be a bold-faced lie, frankly. I said, this must be a prevarication. But I said, I'll come and brief him anyway, because I'm on no secret project, and I'll just share what I know. So under the cover of a dinner party in Washington, outside Washington, Arlington, I was invited with my wife and the CIA Director and his wife, who was the Chief Operating Officer of the National Academy of Sciences, and my host and his wife. By the way, how you like this? The day that we went, I learned that the hostess had no idea who was coming for dinner. Imagine being the hostess with the mostess and being told, honey, Dr. Greer, who's an expert on extraterrestrial intelligence, and the Director of Central Intelligence is coming for dinner tonight. He wouldn't tell her until an hour or so before we arrived. Well, when this meeting began, I spent 10 minutes on the evidence. The CIA Director stopped me and said, I know these things are real, but I want to know why. As Mr. Hellier said, I don't know about it. What are the implications of this secrecy? Who is keeping this secret from us? And what is their agenda? That, my fellow denizens of the earth, are what we spent the next 3 hours discussing. And that is the pressing issue of our time. Because while many people think this issue is about little green men, on the contrary, it's about the future of this planet and who will set the agenda for this planet. And will it be the people of the earth and their representatives, or will it be a kleptocracy who have stolen from us 50 years of our history, where we now face ourselves in war after war in the Middle East over oil, where we see both polar ice caps melting, where we have a clandestine operation which has already placed very powerful weapon systems in space which are tracking and targeting completely non-hostile extraterrestrial vehicles. This is of the utmost importance. Shortly after this meeting with the CIA Director, a good friend of the President's came to my home. And he said, you know, the President's very supportive of having this information come out, but he isn't going to do what you've asked. And I had asked the CIA Director and the President, through his National Security Advisor and some other folks working with him, to do the disclosure project as an official executive order. And this man sat, and, you know, it's stunning to think about, excuse me, at my dining room table with my wife and children, and says, well, he's very supportive of this, but we're convinced that if the President does what you're recommending, he will end up like Jack Kennedy. Which time I burst out laughing. You know, I thought the man was, of course, joking. He stopped me and says, no, we are not joking. President Clinton did not want to pursue this. I have subsequently met, and this is a partial list I will share with you, ranking members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Senator Richard Bryan, who was on that committee from the state of Nevada, where Nellis Air Force Base is located. I have personally briefed the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the head of intelligence for the Joint Staff, and also the Secretary General of the United Nations and his family, Boutros Boutros-Ghali, amongst others. what I found was that the vast majority of people that we think are running our governments are being lied to or denied access. And this permanent, if you will, government, as opposed to the provisional one, I like that analogy,